Hey, before we get going, today's episode is brought to you by Growers & Co. Growers & Co. is the brainchild of Jean-Martin Fortier, the market gardener who is working to create a tool and apparel company that is for growers by growers. The goal of Growers & Co. is to be a brand that represents the dignity, skills, and creativity required to do this work. Since I've known JM, he has been working on this idea, and I have to say, he and his team have kind of knocked it out of the park. I'm not going to lie. I'm a little bit obsessed with the Brandywine straw hat and the Muscovich vest. Hannah has been rocking the Oxheart shirt like crazy. All of the apparel is well made and well fitted, but Growers & Co. is more than just clothes and tools. They are also launching a biannual magazine that is dedicated to the culture of small-scale farming. I will be contributing to that magazine with other excellent farmer writers. It's going to be rad. Learn more at growers.co. Today's show is also brought to you by Farmers Web.
Farmers Web software gives you the tools you need to manage your entire sales process. Built specifically for farmers' needs, Farmers Web helps you save time, reduce errors, increase efficiency, and provides flexibility for working seamlessly with your whole customer base. Our free account includes features for sharing your real-time and coming soon product availability, as well as the option to create an availability calendar to inform buyers about your product's seasonality. Free accounts also include access to Farmers Web's how-to guides, offering pro tips and best practices on selling online to individual buyers, as well as how to work with such buyers as restaurants, schools, and stores. A 1-month free trial is available for the paid account, which includes all features to manage customers and orders, including accepting online credit card sales, handling advanced pickup or delivery orders, giving select buyers special pricing and payment terms, tracking your buyers' payments, keeping detailed sales records, and much more. Even manage orders and payments for buyers not placing their orders online. Request a demo and learn more at farmersweb.com.
Huge thanks to our show sponsors. Now, let's jam. Hey, you all, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to the No-Till Market Garden Podcast, Episode 2, Season 3. Got our first New Zealand farm ever on the podcast, which will actually be one of the at least 2 New Zealand farms on the podcast this year. Anyway, Niva and Yotam K joined me for an interview to chat about Pakaraka Farm, and they are doing some really cool stuff there. They're heavily off-grid, and we talk about that. It's always one of my favorite conversations. How do you do things without electricity when it comes to market gardening? We talk about zucchini production, which is also one of my favorite crops to grow. I was really excited to dive into that. We also dive into strawberries, which is a topic I want to explore more this season. Recycling microgreen trays in a cool way. Crowdfunding capital, and some different projects they are working on, including a documentary and an online course that's done in a really unique fashion. So many cool things in this episode. First, however, make sure you are subscribed to this podcast wherever you're getting it, and consider joining the Patreon page if you want to support our work at patreon.com/no-till-growers. All one word. That's right. We changed the URL from Farmer Jesse, but if you go to the old URL, it still works because the people at Patreon are awesome and redirected it for us. Thanks, Chloe. Make sure to check out no-tillgrowers.com this week, where we are posting our budget so you can go see where your money literally goes. Part of it will also be going towards 3 new podcasts that we're launching in the coming months. More on that later. But for now, let's get into this amazing conversation with Niva and Yotam K of Pakaraka Farm. Niva and Yotam K, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jesse. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Jesse. Hi.
And it's a pleasure to have you all. So first, give us a little rundown of the farm. Where are you located? How many acres are you working on? And those sorts of things.
Cool. Operation is 6 years old now. We started on the first season on a leased land on a quarter acre on another farm. And then by the end of the year, we joined the farm that we're at now, Pakaraka. And the farm is 215 acres, 180 acres is regenerative bush, and 30 acres or so for different horticultural projects. When we joined the farm, we established a quarter acre market garden, and we're now entering our 7th season, and we're located in the North Island in New Zealand. outside of Tim's in the Kauranga Valley. It's a beautiful.
The bigger context of the farm, we have also chestnuts and olives, which we press into olive oil, and animals that are free ranging. And the garden, we started it as a quarter acre, but by now we have.
We just expanded in COVID-19 to a third of an acre.
Oh, okay. And then the situation with the Pakaraka is it sort of a collaboration, or are you renting the land? Like, how does that work?
So basically, the land is owned as a limited company, and then we all have equal shares in the company. So we co-own it together. We're partners, and we work on the farm together. But the market garden is our personal project.
Can you give us a kind of idea of climate and what you're sort of working with, like in terms of temperature and extremes?
Yeah, I think from what I remember, we're about zone 9 at your place, in the US.
Okay.
And we get about 15 to 20 frosts a year where we are. The valley is a little bit colder than the surrounding area. It funnels winds, and we have mountains on both sides, so a little bit less sunlight. And yeah, it's a temperate climate.
Temperate but maritime, because the ocean affects our weather a lot. Normally we have enough rain through summer, but this year we had a drought, a 91 days drought, I think. And that's becoming a trend with climate change, that we have less frosts in the winter and more drought in the summer. So even within that time frame that we've been here, we've seen a big change every season.
And our partner Harry Park records the daily temperature, the daily temperature and the rainfall every day for almost 30 years now. So it's really interesting to see the trends that are localized to this farm.
Yeah, even in terms of flooding, they used to have a flood once every decade, and in the last 8 years, it's become every other year. So, for example, for Harry and Jeanette that recently died, but they had to move their garden from where it was for 20 years because it started flooding every other year.
Wow. Yeah, that's wild. Did you all suffer any of the sort of fires that Australia was suffering last year?
No. A year before we came, a neighbor had a big fire, and that reached to our farm and was a big danger. But fortunately, no property damage was done.
It's not the Australian weather is a lot drier, and the native bush is also a lot more flammable than the New Zealand one.
Right. Okay. So give us a little bit of your background. Like, how did both of you sort of get into agriculture and then come to New Zealand? Were either of you, Niva, are you from New Zealand?
No, Yotam's family is from New Zealand.
Okay. Yeah, give me that background.
Yeah, we were both born in Israel, and our families have been in Israel. All our family is there, and we grew up normal suburban village. Or mine was a little village outside of Tel Aviv, and didn't really grow up with horticulture. Just was all around me. But when I was 18, turning 19, I got dismissed from the Israeli army, and I wanted to volunteer, and I did civil service, and I managed to get a position at an education center for sustainable living. And it was totally new to me. I only knew I wanted to be close to nature, but during that year, I was living on a permaculture farm, working with kids in schools, establishing gardens, learning about everything sustainability, and got hooked. And then a year later, I went to study at university, and I met Niva.
So we went to study. We both met in a program called the Arva Institute for Environmental Studies, which is an interdisciplinary environmental studies and peace leadership. It's a really cool program, actually, because they bring Israelis and Jordanians and Palestinians and internationals, which tend to be Americans mostly, study and live together in this kibbutz in the middle of the desert in Israel. So we took courses in a lot of different environmental practices, so from environmental law, environmental education, sustainable development, and we also had a course in sustainable agriculture. Was it called sustainable agriculture?
Yeah, we had a couple with that teacher.
Yeah. So at the end of that year, I think both of us kind of evaluated the change we felt we can make within the different sort of practices, and we really wanted that hands-on change, and went and did a permaculture course in Europe. Yotam then started his diploma in permaculture and really started diving into that part of environmental practice, wanting to first of all be like hands-on, really engaged with the work that we're doing, and also looking at the food system, which is really broken and problematic for so many reasons, and wanting to contribute to something that can change that, or can show that it's possible to do it differently, and really also practice what we preach. So we wanted to be growers, and then also be able to say, we believe the food system can change.
Yeah, so we had a big veggie garden everywhere we were, like, since about 2006. And in 2012, I got a job as a garden manager for a seed saving organization, a small biointensive run in New Zealand. And after working there for about 15 months, I got offered a job as a co-farm manager on a 30-acre organic market garden. And I worked there for a season. And after that season, they didn't need me anymore. And we got a residency, and we moved on to the Coromandel, to the farm next door, and then to this farm. And we're here since 2014. Yeah, so my grandfather came from New Zealand to Israel to find a wife and establish a family. And but we've never been here before coming to New Zealand in 2012. And it was fantastic to have family around, though. It was quite significant, and we're still in touch with quite a few of our relatives here. Yeah.
Can you take us back to that first quarter acre that you sort of started independently?
Yeah.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit. That's, I think, where I came across your work. Was that the property that Curtis Stone had visited?
No, he visited. So we've been on that place. So when we moved on to Pakaraka, we really didn't know how long we would stay here. We knew we wanted to find a place that we can settle down and establish our growing business. And it didn't look at the time that we should do anything here. Also, this farm is quite hilly country, and the only nice flat paddocks flood. So it was not an obvious place. So we actually leased a quarter acre at another farm that used to have a market garden, but they stopped after a few years, and grew there for a season. And that was just a really big learning curve. So although I was involved in growing food since 2005, it was huge to learn a small scale practices for market gardening. And at the time, I read almost every book I could get my hands on, very influenced with Elliot Coleman's work, and for some reason thought that Elliot Coleman sounded so convincing, there's no way nobody else is doing something better. So I was even skeptical looking at Jean Martin's book at the time, and just continued on. And that was a huge learning curve, managing that quarter acre. And at the end of that first year, which we worked like not full time, but close to it, selling $20,000, we were super, super stoked. And then in the end of that year, we moved on to this we established that we're gonna join this farm permanently, and we installed a water tank and fenced the garden, and first fenced the quarter acre, covered it with weed mat, and start going there. And then within about 6 months of moving to this new garden, from like 6 months from planting the first crop, which was strawberries, Jean Martin and Curtis Stone came here, and we were just blown away by what you can do.
We didn't know about them before they came, so that was it was quite interesting for us when they came here. And we already had the garden that you see in Curtis's video, but just the possibilities of how much more we should try and achieve. And
with that, in that second and the first year on this new garden, second year in operation, we sold $50,000 worth of veggies. We were running we had no tilfer, we had no cool room, we we had just one spring that we tapped to basically working with a hoe, a fork, a rake, and then we learned a lot more of the tricks of the trade, and then the next season really boomed for us. We just realized that you can what's a level of success a growing operation can have, and we just aimed high and worked hard, and yeah.
And the other thing that we are always doing is education. So our business is kind of balancing the two.
I mean, Niva and I did our permaculture teachers training in Israel, and we've both been teaching, but we took almost 3 years being on our farm here to really feel like we practice what we preach. We learn the new practices that are relevant to us before we started teaching them to others. But since we started, we've been having hundreds of people coming here for home gardening courses, advanced gardening courses, and market gardening. And we did fermenting, and we did homesteading.
Still do fermenting.
And we still do fermenting. We just saw what's relevant, what people really wanted, and focused on that.
Yeah, that's great. 50,000 without a cold room is really impressive.
It was a bit crazy.
And that was
waking up at 4 a.m. to harvest, wash, pack, and deliver, pretty much.
I never felt like I worked with torches in the morning, but definitely late at night, packing stuff to the market. We were only doing one weekend market at the time. We were working with a lot of restaurants. We had some really big clients in Auckland at the time, and we had no staff, or we had for that year, I think we might have had one person coming 1 day a week to help us. Otherwise, it was just us doing that, and it was the first season on this new soil, which new site, which our main gardening site has. I sometimes say that we have like 16 flat beds, but everything is really on a slope, and it's usually between 10 to 20 degree slope, and we get about 100 liters of rocks per bed that we took off. It was a lot of work in the beginning, but really streamlined afterwards.
One of the reasons we didn't have a cool room from the get-go is because we're off-grid. So for us to have a cool room, we needed to invest in a much bigger solar system first. So we kind of had to, make the money to invest in the business as we got along.
Yeah, that's a great point. We had basically very little savings that we used mostly to live on and buy seeds and compost for the first season, and just kept reinvesting. And in 2017, we decided that we're gonna crowdfund for a solar system that would be able to run our cool room, our chiller, and we also took a loan at the time to buy an electric car, so a small Nissan Leaf. But with the combination of the cool room and the delivery car, we felt we've got a really strong, sustainable infrastructure behind us.
Yeah, so our goal is always to be, obviously having the lowest carbon footprint. We do think that we don't have a negative carbon footprint, but
it's hard to say. But we definitely
between regenerative practices and using mainly solar power, and then we make a point to go even the further away market we go to, which is 90 kilometers.
Yeah, but
I don't know how many miles that is.
I wrote that down. 56 miles.
To do that with the electric car.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
So I do that market. I always go with the electric car, and then
you charge it there.
Yeah, I charge it. So the market managers have installed a car charger so that I can charge it when I'm there, which is really cool.
Yeah,
and I have enough to come back home.
Just a caravan plug that you can put 16 amps at a time, but it's just enough.
Yeah, because the market is half a day long. So.
Yeah, for sure.
That's great.
Yes.
Okay, so in terms of staff, is it just still you two with an occasional help, or you have more people working for you now?
So at the moment we've got a full-time person of staff, and this is the first winter we've got somebody who's been working with us through the winter. And so last year, one of our students came, and we offered her, and she worked with us full-time. and then we, in the middle of the season, we got somebody else, as we knew she would be leaving by the end of the season, and then that other person, Bianca, is with us now. And
she listens to the podcast, so we're making sure to say hi. Hi, Bianca.
That's great. Yeah.
And she's out there now in the garden when we're speaking. And we are considering, now that we've expanded during the lockdown, we are considering adding another person of staff. And for the previous years, we've been having, because the farm takes the larger farm beyond the market garden, takes a lot of resources to manage. We have been taking volunteers, and they kind of work between the garden and the farm. And we've also hosted 10 weeks training program on the farm for about 3 years. We did 2 of those every year, but those were really, they weren't like the normal internships. They were really focused on education and upskilling. So they involved a lot of teaching during the week, and personal projects and areas of responsibility that changed every 2 or 3 weeks. So just as somebody was getting good at their job, they moved on to something else. So it was it was quite a challenge, and we had some amazing people here. But I don't feel like it you know how it is when you have somebody who's skilled at their task. It's not just the number of people that can replace that quality of work, but we felt it's really important to have people like that. People who really want to have an experience of how it is to work in the garden, that are considering how to do it, can come for a significant amount of time. We really felt privileged to be able to offer that.
Can we cover your marketing a little bit? You mentioned that one market and restaurants. What does it look like now at the moment?
So we year round, we have a few clients that are year round. We have an organic cooperative shop in town that we stock with salads all through the year, and another one locally on the other side of the Coromandel Peninsula. And then we have restaurants that usually kind of linger through the year, mainly taking microgreens. At the moment, we have one restaurant in the Auckland area that's taking also field crops like turnips and daikon and stuff like that. And then when our season starts in spring, our main season, we have 2 markets, one on a Saturday and one on a Sunday. And usually there'll be also more restaurant orders. That's mainly what we do.
Yeah, because of 2 reasons. Like, one, because the farm is really big and needs a lot of things. We try to wind down on the market gardening to focus on other homesteading and general farm tasks. We've got a big chestnut harvesting season and olive season, and then the second is our site. We've got we've got a beautiful native tree, a cacao tree, at the north side of our garden, which is
the sunny side for us.
Yes, good point, Niva. It's about 40 meters high, and in the summer our garden is has full exposure of sunlight. But in the winter, about 2/3 of our garden gets shaded. We don't have sun more than 2 or 3 hours to about 2/3 of our garden, and that lingers onto the edges. So we really didn't have much growing space beyond salads and microgreens to keep production
in the winter.
But as spring spring comes and we have more sun and more beds, we plant that heavily and come to the markets.
Okay, so you're basically in winter right now, right? So
yeah.
You're coming out of it, but before we started the interview, you were mentioning that you have tomatoes and cucumbers. In terms of your propagation house, how are you doing that? Is it heated? And then what are you using?
No, we use some low tech approaches here. Our solar system is substantial, but it's not big enough that we can reliably supply a heat pad. We are looking at connecting our electric vehicle to our home system, and then we'll be able to have a lot more electricity. But at the moment, we take, like, when I want to propagate tomatoes, capsicum, eggplants, cucumbers, zucchinis, I take the trays inside the house and I put them on a bench next to the wood stove. And in the morning, when the wood stove is warm and but not too hot. I'm putting the trays on it, and that's how we've been germinating all of our summer seedlings in the middle of winter since we started here. And then once they've germinated, we can take them to the tunnel house outside, and it's just like a big high tunnel. It's a permanent one with a side wall, and it's 15 feet on 50 feet, and we have had times that our summer seedlings died because of a frost inside the tunnel house, but that only happened once, and usually we managed to get them growing well into the summer. And we quite rely heavily on successions, so I don't put all my eggs in one basket. We don't sow all of our summer seedlings in one go, but every 2 to 3 weeks we put in another lot. So if one crop wasn't doing that well, we just dismissed it and moved on to the next one and propagated another one.
Germinating your seeds on a wood stove is exactly like what we did when we were off grid. It's the off grid solution.
Yeah,
it works.
Oh, totally, absolutely. It's a great method.
Yeah.
So okay, so I want to get into some crops with you all. Because you told me in an email that you grow about 25 crops with Lebanese cucumbers, lettuce, microgreens, zucchini, and carrots being the bulk of it. But the one thing that really stuck out to me there in that list is that zucchini.
Yeah.
I love growing summer squashes, but I don't always think of it on par with, say, lettuce or microgreens. Like, it doesn't always strike me as one of the most profitable crops we grow. How have you made zucchini one of your profitable crops?
Yeah, I guess in our second or third year, we had to make a decision. We've had enough demand to sell only lettuce, only salad mix, and continue with wholesaling. And we decided at the time that we don't want to do that. We don't want to just become a salad farm. We wanted to grow a variety of vegetables, and that basically pushed our marketing from focusing on restaurants to focusing on markets. And we were focusing on a diverse range of vegetables, so the same people who come to buy from us can buy a wide range of stuff and come really early with them. So I don't know what's the equivalent for you for the second or third week of October, but
June, no.
Is it mid-February? I'm not sure.
No.
But we.
Oh, for right. Yeah, it's that for us. That's like late fall. So we're going into, we're starting to have frost for our.
Yes. I mean, if the equivalent, if I'm sowing here if I'm harvesting courgettes in October, that's like you harvesting courgettes in middle of February.
In August, I think.
No.
Wait, no.
No. It would be like March or April, maybe. Like you're doing that pretty early, right?
Yes.
So
you're right. April. Yeah.
So we would get our first ones. Like we start harvesting in May. Yes. Sometimes we can get them in April. Like we start harvesting our squashes in April.
Yeah.
But usually it's like May.
Yeah. So we try and focus
that month of coming earlier to the market with the courgettes before most people have them. That's what makes them profitable crops for us.
We try and have about half a ton, like 500 kilos, 1,000 pounds of courgettes by Christmas, and that's where the value is really high. We can sell them usually at $1.50, $2 each, and that just makes it much more profitable. And then we wind down the numbers during the summer and keep production well into the fall. So we feel like because we're so prolific and we can get a high price point in the beginning of the season until summer, and there's a huge demand for them. People really love having summer vegetables that are at really high quality, not like winter tunnel house grown ones, as early as possible. Like the moment that there's nice sunny days in the spring, people would rush to them.
Yeah. The other thing, that's more with the cucumbers, is also just with the variety, because the standard variety here in New Zealand is the Telegraph cucumber. And as someone who came from the Middle East, I don't think it's a nice cucumber at all. So we grow Lebanese cucumbers, which is the same ones we have back home, and they just taste so much better that people will come as early as they can to the market just to buy the cucumbers. they'll buy like 10 cucumbers, and we sell out of cucumbers every time.
And we go about 2.5 tons, at 2,500 kilos of cucumbers a season, like 5,000 pounds. And we grow a lot of cucumbers, partly because our garden is, as I said, was significantly slopey, and it's really beneficial. And there's a lot of beds that we can't, because we haven't terraced them, we can't direct sow in them successfully, and so we rely on planting. And cucumbers and courgettes are one of those crops that I can put weed mat, landscaping fabric if I want, put holes in it, plant the cucumbers, and they can just stay there for 6 months to 8 months and just keep on harvesting. So we put them in the field quite early. We've got the first courgettes ready to be planted this week, and we'll put them like on a bed that has holes in the landscaping fabric. We'll put hoops with clear film, and that's how we'll go about it. So it's really better for us in terms of management to have crops that we don't need to plant very often on those steep beds.
That's interesting. I was thinking about that Lebanese cucumber thing. And one thing that I've learned sort of in marketing is that if you're passionate about it, you can sell it.
Absolutely.
And I think I went into marketing like not realizing that, but that some things like edamame, for instance, that's not something that sells easily at market, but we love eating edamame. So when we go to market and talk it up, people buy it.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that Lebanese cucumber story a lot.
We have the same thing with salad turnips because our kids love them. So anyone that comes and goes, "What's this?" I'm like, they're the best. The kids love them. They'll eat it just like that. And then people buy them. And I sometimes refuse to grow crops that I don't feel passionate about selling in the market. Or like you could see, depending on who's the person at the stall, what they're selling is what they're loving. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a powerful thing for moving vegetables.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit more in depth on maybe both the zucchini and cucumber production? We haven't talked a lot about cucurbits on this podcast.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, like, can you give us a little bit of spacing and variety detail on the zucchini first?
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to mention that we did start of last year. We had another friend who moved to live with us on the farm, and she's been helping me out with propagation. So she's taken control over that, and sometimes she's been doing some of the markets. Just to plug that in, because I don't want to forget her. We love, we really appreciate her help, and thank you, Tess. Sorry, yes, back to the question on cucumbers and courgettes. Courgettes, we grow. We don't have like an absolute favorite in terms of variety. I don't know if you have the same. We're using Parthenon for courgettes. We've been growing scalopinis in the past, and we've been growing yellow courgettes. But really, we find that the standard green market varieties do really well. In the beginning, I was really refusing to use any hybrids, but talking to a retired market gardener, he really convinced me to try, and I could just see the difference in some of the lines. So courgettes, zucchinis is one of those that we're growing. A hybrid variety. And because we're a very small farm and there's not a lot of there's a few good seed companies in New Zealand, but some of the best commercial lines are only available in really high numbers, and it's not really feasible for us to buy 1,000 courgette seeds. So we don't necessarily use the best line available in courgettes. We space them usually 90 centimeters, so something like 36-inch apart. And our beds are ranging between 90 to 100 centimeters, so 36 to 40 inch. That's most of our beds. Initially, we worked on narrower beds, but we realized that our paths we left 40 centimeters for our paths, and we decided that that's just too much, and we can lower that down. We can have paths that are 12 inches. So we just increased the width of our beds rather than starting relaying our beds. So that's courgettes. We grow them in the same spacings year round. Usually, in the beginning of the season, if we don't lay landscaping fabric, we'll interplant courgettes with lettuces or with radishes or with beets. And we find that in the early season, they grow relatively slow, and we can get another crop into full, like, to become into maturity. Sometimes we'll even plant the courgette. Like last season, I've planted one of the beds inside the bed of beets. I just took the middle beet and just planted it in there. So we try and interplant as much as we can, and it works really well with early courgettes. But we found out that already by the end of spring, if with the successions that we will try and interplant, that gets a lot trickier, because the summer squash, the zucchini, will just grow so fast and will smother whatever we're going. So usually we can just get away with a row of radishes on either side, and we still try and do it just because it's fun.
It's not so nice in the summer when the courgettes are quite big. It's also not so nice to be picking from under them because they're quite itchy.
Yeah, it's really key to get rid of that crop before the courgette gets big. Otherwise, there's complaints.
Otherwise, those radishes don't get picked, and they just hang out there.
It actually also doesn't work that well in the summer, because we use drip lines for those beds, and it's already getting too dry just to have the growing with the natural rain, and the quality of the radishes goes down quite a lot. So we can just really mostly interplant in the spring.
I find that zucchini and squash are both good for putting into existing crops. Like we had good luck we did the same thing, interplanting them with radishes this spring, and that worked really well. And even maybe made them hardier, because we had a late freeze this year that was terrifying. But they survived it. The zucchini did. And also was able to put them into carrots, and put squash into carrots and squash into potatoes.
Wow.
And as long as you get them out before the roots really, really, get the potatoes or the carrots out before the roots of the squash really take over, then you're golden. Like it was surprising how well they took to that situation.
Cool.
Anyway, I want to hear about the cucumbers too.
Yeah, we do have a favorite variety. We tried all the Lebanese cucumber varieties we could get our hands on, and I don't know if it's under the same name at your place, but Ender Zayden sells a variety called Melon, Melen, and it's just a beautiful disease-resistant, consistent, fantastically tasting cucumber. So we've basically been growing almost just that. I mean, we started with about 8 different varieties of cucumbers, all the different heirloom varieties, and people and chefs do appreciate it, but mostly people want the standard cucumbers, and so we generally focused on them.
The Lebanese cucumber here is already not standard by itself, so
yeah. And so we grow them in quite a few successions. We usually have 7 or 8 successions during the season, and we grow them at different spacings throughout the year. I'll usually plant them quite close. I'll plant it could be up to 6 plants a meter in the beginning of the season, and then usually I'll lower it down to 2 rows. Maybe 20 inch apart between the plants, and as much spacing as I can between the rows. It also depends if the bed is a narrower bed or a wider bed, to how much we'll put in it. Sometimes we just have 1 row in the middle of the bed and plant them relatively close, like 12 inches apart. We only let them sprawl on the ground, and we keep pushing them back onto the bed, just lifting them gently and directing the leads. Yeah,
and we usually keep them into production all the way to April, until the first frost, essentially.
Yeah, this year we had them all the way into May. Yeah, like your November. We keep them in successions because it takes them about 2 months to get into peak production, and then they stay there for about 2 months. It really depends on how well the crop is, how happy is the crop. If it's happier, it will stay longer. We've had crops that have been like plants that have just been producing that have been in the ground for 8 months, producing for 6 months with really nice quality fruit all the way through. And sometimes the quality of the fruit will start to decline, and we'll just take that one out and put another. So we don't use, we just use biological inoculants and natural fertilizers, and to try and have the plants happy. But we're not trying to fight any specific pests on cucumbers, and we don't need to to knit them in any way. We just grow them outside. The biggest problem is in the spring, having slugs sometimes eating the cucumbers or courgettes. That's the main pest.
Oh no.
Yeah, we've got quite a high, with the no-till high organic matter system we're using, we've got quite a high slug pressure, and the chickens and the ducks around the garden are not helping enough.
Hey, you all, just jumping in real quick to get a word from our micro sponsors like Tilth Soil. Tilth Soil makes NOP-compliant living potting soils in Cleveland, Ohio, with food scraps they haul and compost themselves. Each batch of soil is tested against competitors, and the results are in. Plants vote for Tilth Soil. Order October through December for the 2021 growing season and get 10% off at tilthsoil.com. The show is also brought to you by you. You are the primary funder for our work. I call it micro sponsors, but you're not a micro sponsor. You, the patrons, are a huge sponsor of this show. You can do that through patreon.com/no-till-growers, though you can always kick us a few bucks through Venmo to @no-till-growers. If you go the Patreon route at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs this week to Scott Snodgrass, Andrew and Haley Keeler from Avoda Sustainable Acres, Jody Miller, Shane and Emma of Aslan Organics, Tony Lopez, Clement, Travis and Heidi of Arcadia Acres, Judson Taylor, Seeds and Soil Farm, John Mills, Grown Up Farm, Jacob Arthur, Clara Coleman, Wild Mountain Seeds, Bob and Ann Patton, Jared Kirst, Jay Armour, Dan Brisebois, C-Mac Small, Jay McCombs, Tim Baldwin, Marc-Andre Giroux, Patricia Jones, Steve Larson, Fiona and Donnie of Firefly Farm, Ryan Gosser, Jean-Martin Fortier, Yannick Laplante, and Jen Lawrence. Thank you to everyone who supports our show. Back to the interview.
Right. Okay, so I do want to get to your no-till systems in a second. One last thing, though, in terms of crops. One of the videos that Curtis did with you back when he was there was about strawberries. And you told me that you've kind of backed away from strawberries for market. Can you talk about what you learned in growing intensive strawberries, and then also kind of talk about why you've backed away from it?
Yeah, I really wanted to grow strawberries. We moved onto this farm. We didn't have a lot of fruit, and it just sounded so exciting. So I got about 1,000 runners, and gave a few. I think it was 700 or so runners we planted in the first season. I researched and talked to other farmers who were growing, and I got a variety that I knew was good for our area, and Camarosa, and suits our slightly colder Coromandel weather that tends to have a lot of cloud, and yeah, we planted those runners. We gave them a lot of fertility. It was the first time a crop ever entered into that bed, and we had this amazing crop of strawberries. That's the one that Curtis showed. We've had higher yields than what the books say that you can, like the maximum yields for strawberries, and we sold them at a premium price. We kept the price pretty much throughout the season, and we had a small amount of rejects, which we were very happy to have the rejects. Of course, anybody who harvested strawberries could have as much as they want. We had as much as we wanted. We probably preserved probably 200 pounds of strawberries in sauce and stuff, and ate that for the year. And yeah, it was fantastic. People were just amazed to see strawberries that are such high quality, and you can just, like, the organic shop, people came into the shop and smelled them, like, and said, wow.
Yeah, and organic strawberries, because strawberries, they're notoriously one of the top of the dirty dozen list of crops being sprayed. And really the reason for that is whenever there's rain or high humidity even, they do get, they're very susceptible to fungi. So if you're on a conventional farm, what they do is if they know there's rain, they're already out there spraying it. So for us, because we don't do that, even just the process of sorting out every strawberry that might infect other strawberries, it did take a lot of labor. It very much depends on the season we're having. So in a season like this year where we had a drought, that might have not been an issue at all. But in a year that's quite wet, it just means a lot of sorting.
We found that it was inconsistent for the year, so we've been keeping the strawberries for a second year because the amount of fruit is the same, they're just a bit smaller, but that actually takes a lot more time to harvest. So the first year strawberries are just so much easier. So a lot of pick your owns only let people pick for second year strawberries, and they sell the first years once. So we found that so we've been growing them for until even last year we were selling strawberries, but in smaller amounts. And we really did the maths on it. And even when it's, I guess like all things, if you're really passionate about something, it doesn't matter like numbers that much. You can do it if you're really happy, but it tended up to be quite onerous work harvesting them, and then also really getting disappointed when crops are not doing well. We really wanted to enjoy them as perennials, and then planting them as annuals kind of didn't feel as good. And so we always had half and half of those crops, which was in some ways good because it spread out the harvest. Each one of them gets maturity at a different stage in the season. We just found it hit and miss. And when we did the calculations for about even the best strawberry yield per square meter, an average crop of lettuces will be about 8 times more profitable. And as we were deciding which crops to grow, strawberries were really at the bottom of our profitability list, and we decided that we're still going to be really diverse, but we're just going to keep strawberries on to a home scale. If we had a larger farm, and maybe would also pay more attention to I don't know, either planting them every year or find a way that we can use natural fungicides.
No, I think one of the other things, I mean, the strawberries were still really popular in the markets every year, and we can still bring them quite early and sell them for a really high price. But strawberries are so yummy that everything wants to eat them. We have quite a lot of bird pressure here, so if we had infrastructure to build like a berry house, for example, that would have made a big difference. But whenever you go to the patch and you find that the blackbirds have already tried every single strawberry, we had beetle pressure in them. Of course, the slugs love them. Even the ducks love them, though they don't usually get access to them. I think it's a combination of all those things where it's a great crop, but mainly I think we just got tired of it. I think if as we're saying, if we were really passionate about harvesting strawberries, we could make it work. And if someone is keen and wants to also make sure they keep the birds out, you have to go to the strawberry bed every day. So for a lot of our crops, we do a big market harvest on a Friday, and then a small one on a Saturday, and that's enough for the Saturday and Sunday markets. But with strawberries, you really need to go to them every single day.
Yes.
So it just wasn't working for our context. But there's still potentially like a really good crop for someone who's and obviously there are people growing strawberries around the world.
I think probably key things if somebody wants to go into strawberry production is, especially with climate disruption, you want to grow them under cover. Whenever we grew comparison crops under cover and without cover, like we just used the field hoops with clear film, they just grew so much better. The plants were so much healthier. Treating them as annuals, making sure that we always cut the tops off in winter to let the plants rejuvenate, but also need to thin them down, and because they really expand into a big clump. So either put them at a really high spacings, or
you're talking about treating them as annuals, so that doesn't matter.
No, I mean if you do want to keep them as perennials, because there is some advantage to that. Yeah, probably undercover and treating them as annuals would give you the best return.
Definitely the ones that are under hoops do the best by far.
Yeah, and we do have a high like bird pressure here. We have we can't really direct seed or even plant lettuces or beets up like for most of the season because the birds will eat the leaves. So we really need to get all of our seedlings and all our seeds under cloches and under fabric until they mature and they're less delicatable for the birds. Yeah. Any other questions on
Wow.
strawberries or?
No, I think that's good. I mean, I think that's some good perspective. Give us an idea of your soil prep. Like, what do you do, or what are you going to be doing here coming up as the spring gets going to get a bed started?
Yeah, we've been fine tuning our practices. This spring, usually we do one fork. We fork the beds lightly using one of our large forks. We just gently give them a tug in the soil to bring some more air in, and we'll put a thick layer of compost. We have a custom soil test, and we work with a local fertilizer company that specializes in nutrient density, and we have a custom mix that we add onto our soil. We tilth the bed, we plant, and then we cover. We found out that we don't really want to fork the beds and even tilth the beds more than once in the season. So we try and give it a little bit more aeration and in the spring. But otherwise, our site is really free draining. We're on quite a significant slope, and it's really hard to keep the water in the soil. And every time that we fluff up the soil or aerate it, we're just actually noticing lower production, lower yields.
Okay.
Yeah, so we put compost 2 to 3 times a season. We've put really heavy applications in the beginning, and now it's more on a maintenance level because the soil fertility is really high. We have the last soil tests consistently showed we're at about 12% organic matter in our soils. Well, we started from 4.5, 5.
Wow, that's great. So, are you using things like cover crops or anything like that? Like, are you going into the season having to terminate some cover crops?
Some seasons we have put in cover crops, but we're finding that in terms of cover crops, we've been trialing, we've been growing different cover crops, mainly to use the material for compost. But we found out that we're really marginal in the amount of space we have for good cropping in the spring and in the fall, and then in the winter it's too shady to really establish crops. So we rely on an organic matter from either compost that we make. We make about 15 cubic meters of compost, about 20 cubic yards most seasons of compost. We have a fantastic local arborist that dumps a lot of wood chip here onto the farm, and we've got a local seaweed factory that we can get the spent seaweed and mix that in.
We also use when we harvest our microgreen trays, we use the potting mix that's in the trays with all the roots and all the organic matter that's there, and we compost that as well.
Yeah, we've been changing our practice on that, but the microgreens potting mix, we often reuse part of it, and then the other part goes onto the garden. So new trays will have the bottom part with reused material, reused potting mix, and then new potting mix on top. So that does mean that we're getting about 10 cubic meters of potting mix into the garden beds, and that's just premium soil conditioner.
When you say you're reusing it, can you describe what that means? Like you're reusing part of the microgreen tray soil mix?
Yeah. So once we harvested the crop, if it's healthy and they had no problems, we put it in a big bag and let it decompose, usually for 2 to 3 months. And then when we go to fill out new trays, we'll use about 3/4 of the tray with old potting mix, compact that, and then put a thin layer of new potting mix, and that just works really well for us.
Okay, I got it. Yeah, interesting. I've always wondered like if you couldn't just freeze it or solarize it and then, like you said, mix it in with fresh potting soil.
Yeah. So the layering really works well. And it just means a spotting mix is such a rich material, and it's also one of the has the heaviest environmental impact of everything we're using. So we just really try and use that to the best of our abilities.
Yeah, that's great.
We have been practicing making our own, and we do that occasionally, but we're not set up for doing that at the
For
moment.
the quantities of microgreens that we grow, we're not able to produce all of our spotting mix yet.
We think we can in the future, but we just need to improve our setup a little bit. And
right.
Yeah.
That's great, and I'm jealous of having a seaweed factory. Like, we're very landlocked where we are. We have a lot of horse manure and stuff, but that's becoming problematic for residual herbicides and stuff. But yeah, being close to an ocean, that is a definite boon. So you all are super busy with the farm, obviously, but you've got a lot of other things going on as well. You sort of mentioned having classes and stuff on your farm. Can you talk about the masterclass that you the online courses and the book, and Niva, I know you're involved in a documentary. Can you talk about those three things? Those are all super interesting.
Yeah, let's start with the online course. I'll let Yotam start.
Sure. For the last year, I've been developing and I've developed an online market gardening course, which came from a lot of people were asking us if we have online resources, and with people were coming quite far away to our workshops, and our workshops were being full, and we just, with all of the other things that we were doing, we couldn't open more of them. So we decided to document every practice and everything behind our operation and make that accessible. And we've created a really comprehensive resource that's online. It's in our New Zealand context, but I think is useful in other places in the world as well, in temperate climates, and it's based on written lessons, written texts, and it has pictures, and it's been I've had quite a few people involved in helping me make this to what it is at the moment.
Yeah, and it has at the end of each lesson there's also assignments. So if you're starting up your market garden and you follow through with the assignments, then you're kind of gradually building your business with that as well.
Yeah,
it gives you a lot of pointers to what you're looking at, and like understanding your own context and how you want to go about it. And the students are registering from all over the world, really, which is really cool, because we haven't done any marketing. We haven't told we haven't even made a Facebook post about it.
This is the first place we're talking about it now.
Yeah.
And we just wanted to make sure it's really working for everybody's there. We've got already close to 100 students, and there's like forums that people can ask questions, and I can help with feedback. Really excited about this resource, and it's just a start. We've got Niva's been working as a filmmaker for the last almost 3 years, and we've got professional filming gear. And this season we're gonna add more videos to it, and we're gonna create a fermenting course and a gardeners and a home gardeners course.
Yeah,
so
which
really excited.
Would probably be more video based rather than text based like that one.
Yeah.
I think the text base is really cool. Like, when I got to cruise around it for a minute, and I thought the text base was interesting because you can skip to exactly the information that you want really quickly. And then it's sort of like reading a book, and then at the bottom you get to engage with the author. That's what I felt like, because I saw all the people who you were communicating with, all the people that had questions, and I was like, this is pretty neat. This is definitely, like a kind of different take on the online course, and I thought that was pretty cool. Speaking of a book, though, talk about that a little bit.
So a couple of months ago, really, we've been contacted by a publisher. It's a New Zealand, Australia-based publisher. And one of the women who's working for them, she came to one of our advanced gardening courses. And so she called us and said, do you think you can write a home gardening book in 3 months? And we said, yes.
Can we make it 4, please?
Yeah, that's impressive.
So Yeah. So we've been working pretty hard on that. We're co-writing it, which has been a really interesting and cool experience, I think, because yeah, I think it brings a broader sort of perspective into the lesson, into the chapters.
We thought we could really rely more on the course on the market gardening, but actually we're rewriting everything to fit the context of home gardeners. And yeah, it's going really well. That should come out mid 2021, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And besides that, we homeschool. We produce our firewood. We've got a house cow. Off grid, we've got our own water source. Haven't talked about that, but that's quite a challenge to work with our own. We were very privileged to have spring water from the mountains, but that's also a system that we operate. And Niva's been producing and directing a film.
Yeah. So the film that I'm working on is actually documenting the school strikes that were happening last year. In the Aotearoa New Zealand context, and we were following 5 different teenagers. Each one of them is a leader in their own area in the movement. And the film is a lot about how they've built the movement and how they started with their small strikes and ended up with a really big. The third strike they had in 27th of September last year was massive. It was the biggest one-day action, I think, in the history of New Zealand. It was 170,000 people in the streets and 7.5 million worldwide students demanding climate action. But the film also looks at the differences between organizing it in the capital city versus a small town, rural setting like Thames, where there's quite a lot of conservative older people running stuff. And then also in New Zealand's bigger city, in Auckland, there's also the tension between central Auckland and South Auckland. There's some actually racial tension and conversations about things like privilege and police racial profiling, all those topics that are very relevant now, especially where you're at, but are obviously, worldwide issues that we have to deal with in every context. Even in activist spaces, we still have to think about racial prejudice and what that means and how that plays out. So we made this film completely with no funding, no government funding, no funding whatsoever, actually. And we set up a production company called the Rebel Film Collective, and we've put a call out, and heaps of people who were equally, passionate about climate action, professional filmmakers came and helped document what was happening. We crowdfunded to pay our offline editor, which was also again it was really just amazing to see. One of the things about crowdfunding is just when you get to see that even when government is not supporting, or like the people with the money, that communities do come together when they're passionate about something, when they think something is good and worthwhile. And it's really heartwarming to see that. I think we've seen that when we were crowdfunding for the solar system. Yeah. And also with the Rebel Film Collective, we've experienced that people power. So that's been pretty amazing. We are quite close to finishing the edit of the film. So the final process of coloring and all of that sort of stuff should be by the end of August, and hopefully it will come out, which maybe in the US in festivals, or locally we're hoping to premiere it late October.
It's, if anybody wants to write the name down, it's High Tide, Don't Hide.
And we're on Facebook and Instagram. We have a website, so find us out. You don't have to include all of that, sorry.
No, that's good. I like that. And I think one thing that I'm curious about, if you all have a few more minutes, is a few things. We can even touch on farming for one more second too, because you sparked the question about water. I think people are going to be interested in hearing that. But the crowdfunding thing, I think this is like a really interesting subject. Are you, like, when you were crowdfunding, did you use specific sites, or maybe it's just specific to New Zealand, but did you use specific sites to do that? And then what did you do about marketing and those sorts of things for like somebody who has a big project they want to do, whether
Yeah.
a farm or documentary or something? But yeah, like, how did you go about that?
Well, choosing the site is actually quite important for us. For the farm, we used Pledge Me, which is a New Zealand website, because we knew that our main contribution would be coming from New Zealand, and it had the right system for us to do that. For the film, we used a website called Chuffed, which specializes in nonprofit crowdfunding for nonprofit projects. They do a lot of small, social. It's not so much for like enterprises. It's more, for social movements and things like that.
I think crowdfunding is an amazing platform, and it was just amazing to experience our crowdfunding campaign. But I think for people who are considering that, I would suggest to really think it carefully, because actually the amount of time that we were working on the crowdfunding, we would have just been able to grow vegetables. It took so much work that we would have gotten the same by just growing vegetables. And we basically opened up a big shop offering produce. We're offering courses. It's like it wasn't like donation based mostly. It was mostly about giving services.
It's like a big pre-sale of everything you can offer.
And there's a lot of like, it's an art to do that well. So I would really recommend somebody to if you're considering this, to research it well.
One of the main things you need to know is when you're crowdfunding that it's a full-time job. So if you're wanting to work your full-time job and crowdfund, that's going to be very, very stressful.
Yes.
For our context, we were providing everything, at value. So it was like a big pre-sale. For the film, it was a bit different.
Yes.
Because it's more donation based.
Yeah, that's been our experience. Obviously, like, listeners of this show will know that I literally have to pitch the Patreon every week to get, to keep it going. So that's our version of crowdfunding, and it's a lot of work, and I think that's something people definitely have to take into consideration. And then doing the upfront marketing to get to the position when you have a little bit of a reach helps, but it is a very full-time, difficult job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and okay, so I do. If you'll take one more question, let's end on something nerdy.
There's no rush, Jesse. As much as you have time and want to talk about things, we can stay here as long as you want.
Cool. Okay, so I want to talk about water. Tell me about the sort of water situation. And you mentioned the mountain water. Like, what is the water, and then like what is the difficulty there?
Yeah. As I said, we're really privileged because the farm is quite large. We've got springs coming out from the mountain year round. The flow is really reduced in the summer to a trickle. But even in the summer, so we've started with one spring, and we have improved the capturing. We capture the spring water after it's already flowed for a few, at least 100 meters, and then with a small clay dam, we collect it to a sedimentary tank, and then to a large 30,000 liter tank, and then that's gravity fed to our gardens. There's about 50 yards elevation difference between our tank and our gardens, so we've got really good pressure. The trick is to make sure that is really clear, and like we're capturing all the water that's in the dam. And our expectations of how much water the garden actually needs have also changed. In the beginning, I thought 10,000 liters is enough for us in a week, because that's what I had. Even in our first season, part of our crop limitations were just we didn't have enough water, or we had to move the irrigation 30 times to get the whole garden watered. Well, here we only needed to do that 10 times, and then we installed a comprehensive automatic irrigation system. But basically, we we have a floating ball on the tank that shows us the level of the tank, and we can identify usually within a second day when the water is not coming in as much as it should be, and then I need to go up and take care of that immediately to unblock any problem that there was. And if I'm not doing that immediately, then I'll start having significant water issues, and then I'll need to start thinking, okay, who gets water first, who doesn't, and then at some points even sacrificing whole plots, which had to do for the years. We have expanded to another every year, pretty much, or not every year, but for the last 2 years, we've added another spring every year, increasing our water supply to something like 60 to 80,000 liters every week.
That's partially because the droughts are becoming longer and longer.
Yeah, and and then we've got 3 springs, and then managing the flow of all of those is quite yeah. They all need a bit of a trick. Some of them are easier to access, but some of them I need to go a few 100 meters walk up to the water source. I love doing it. It's just so beautiful in those gullies, but it is a problem in the operational side. And now a friend of mine who's working with Arduino, Arduino, yes. He said he just built for us. His name is Simon. Thank you, Simon. He just built a sensor that can go into our water tank that will sit on each of the 3 inlets from the springs, and will communicate with us here and tell us if the water stopped flowing in any of our intakes, so we can immediately act upon that, or hopefully the next day act upon that. So yeah, keeping those lines clear, those dams clear. We are considering waterproofing our farm, I just love this super high quality water that we filter down here at the gardens, and filter even further in our post-harvesting shed. And I'm a bit reluctant to move on to another source, but I'm thinking we probably will need to either install a bore, get somebody to drill, or to pump water from the river, get a solar pump. Any of those are going to be really expensive, probably $10,000 to $25,000 to set up either of those systems to work. So I'm trying to make the springs work really well. We'll get somebody professional to find the source of them and dam some of them up, and so we can fill our tank, and when the tank is full, it will just continue to flow down to the river, down to the creek, and then to the river. Yeah, it's a challenge. We can't just turn the tap and always have water.
Yeah, but on the other hand, being water independent means that even where in town they had water restrictions, which meant people in town here, because of the drought, were not allowed to water their gardens. But we are still able to water our gardens because we have our own water. And then, which also means that people are coming to buy our vegetables because they can't grow their own.
Yeah, and that also, and it helps to, well, we don't wish for that. We always really try and help people and encourage people to grow as much food as they can. That's like part of our education. We just want more food to be grown in the backyards. It's just goes hand in hand in small scale market gardening.
Yeah, I think, like you're talking about waterproofing our farm. It's just a bigger conversation again with climate disruption that the whole country and probably the whole world needs to have about being more resilient to drought, which was just not something New Zealanders had to deal with before.
Yeah, we do, we've increased, our watering systems are really accurate now, and with drip and sprinklers, and we're really conscious of the amount we're using, and our organic matter is now really high, but our site is just having this huge drop over, in some places, it's actually and we don't farm that. We've got an orchard there, but we've got a 40 degree slope for significant, maybe 100 feet just below our gardens. So water doesn't stay in our gardens. So we sometimes put wood chips in the paths, but because of the slope, that's actually sometimes really difficult. And that's another reason why courgettes and cucumbers work really well. They need less water than delicate greens in the summer, but still we've got a significant amount of greens, and that we just need to keep in prime condition. So yeah, we use a lot of water.
Yeah, that's great. And I like the idea of having multiple water sources. I think that's a really smart approach. Just in terms of having a well, having a spring, all of those things, like having all that together just makes you more water resilient.
Thank you. I had just one more thing. I don't know if you have another minute.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
I just didn't talk at all about, I don't know what you think. I wasn't even sure how appropriate it would be, but during the lockdown, we really, so New Zealand had a lockdown and finished in a few months. And when it just started, we expanded our garden and we found a sunny spot that's like completely sunny year round and relatively flat, but it was full of rocks. And we tried to work it by hand. Then we saw that that's going to be really hard. We tried a neighboring tractor to come. That didn't work, like a two-wheel tractor, a bent wheel blade. Then another tractor come with bent wheel blade. And eventually I got a mini excavator, a 1.5-ton excavator, and I dug the whole 500 square meters, like 5,000 square feet. And I dug it to about half a meter, to like 20 inches deep, and took all the rocks out. And we had ended up in that 500 square meters. We had about 20 cubic yards of rocks, which is just like 20 liters per square meter. And that's just we've luckily to have help here from people on the farm that just did so much. But once we've done that, we've actually, with the digging, some of that topsoil was close to even a meter deep. So I'm sitting on this beautiful, beautiful rich topsoil, but has too many rocks. And this one-time intervention of the mini excavator made it possible to have that garden as a food source, like a food growing source for quite a long time. And the amount of fuel was just like 2 trips to Auckland and back. So.
One trip, didn't we?
1 to 2, depends on the car.
That's great. No, I mean, sometimes that's necessary to get the ground in a proper place where you can get it photosynthesizing as quickly as possible and effectively as possible. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it is a step backward in terms of a lot of disturbance to get 2 steps forward.
Yeah. So we level that site, so we have a flat year-round sunny garden. I'm so excited. We've so now from a 1/4 acre will be 1/3 of an acre.
But we'll be retiring parts of this garden, top garden, into perennials. Yeah. And we do also cut flowers and stuff like that. Yeah. So
it's been for 3 years we've been doing cut flowers, and we're going to increase that a little bit. And the new fencing of the new garden is going to be is already with recycled plastic posts, so like made from milk bottles. So that's really exciting as well.
Oh, cool. Okay. Well, Yotam and Niva, I appreciate so much your time. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Jesse. It's such a privilege to be here, and we just really, really appreciate your work. And we're keen listeners on the show. And thank you so much for all that you're doing.
Absolutely.
All right, if you enjoyed that episode, make sure to check out Pakaraka Farm on Instagram and all the places. We will hook it up with links in the show notes. Also, make sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're getting it and leave a review. But all reviews this week must include a review of the documentary Gather, because it's awesome. It's a great movie. It's way better than my podcast. Anyway, huge thank you to Jackson Roulette and Josh Satin. Thank you to Willie Breeding for my ridiculous theme song. Biggest thank you ever to my wife Hannah for all of her help. She's literally had to take the kids outside so I could record this intro. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Yeah, we've already got our tomatoes in, and they're just about to be moved to the bigger containers, the 2-inch containers, and we've got cucumbers up, and lots. It's spring here.
Yeah, you got to get those. You got to get those tomatoes going for. So you have fresh tomatoes by Christmas, right?
Yeah, we try about a month earlier to have our tomatoes ripening. But tomatoes are actually not a big crop for us. We do about 200 plants, 150 to 200 a year. But everything else, we kind of get into the markets really early in the spring or relatively early. For us, it's like October. We usually want to be there, and
with cucumbers and courgettes as early as possible.
Yeah, usually with courgettes and cucumbers as well.